Forsaken, abandoned to the dark, what choice but to follow the flame? The fire to tear down the old ways, burning away all fear, doubt, and weakness. Nothing remains but power and ambition. This roaring fire will always demand more. More fuel. More sacrifice. The fiercest heat to forge the hardest steel. Destiny. Rising from within the crucible. To seize the world with this fire is to see it burn first.
Okay, I think we are all set to go. Yes, everything looks like it's not burning anymore. Can you tell I haven't done this in too long? All right, chat, can y'all hear me? Can y'all see everything?
Yep.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so, hello everyone, welcome back to Lorebeards. It has been a super long time. I think everything is where it's supposed to be and nothing's smoking or on fire, but if so, we'll just blame it on the Chaos Dwarfs and say it's not my fault. So, without further ado, why don't we introduce our guests? So if we could start up here in the top left, if you could introduce yourself for the chat, just kind of explain who you are and what you're doing here, then go ahead.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Shitskoi. I'm one of the former content creators on the Brazen broadcast for Chaos Dwarfs Online, and I'm a massive Chaos Dwarfs fan. I did a video with Sotek about a year ago now when we were first thinking about what the future held for the Chaos Dwarfs, and I'm really excited to be back here talking to you with some more cool guys from Chaos Dwarfs Online.
Awesome. Next up above me, please.
I think Jessica, you go next. Sorry, we can't actually see. So
probably we have other different things.
Yes.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jasko from Germany. Long-time Warhammer player for 25, 30 years. Almost as long Chaos Dwarf fan. Happy member of the Chaos Dwarfs online community, and I'm super excited to talk about everything related to Chaos Dwarfs.
Great. And our last person?
Hi, I'm Lake Tide from Sweden, and I haven't been a member as long as these guys on the forums, but I think I'm here because I play a lot of Total War and a lot of tabletop as well with Chaos Dwarfs.
Awesome. So let's not start, let's just come out of the gates charging. So the trailer. Yay, nay? Did y'all enjoy it?
Mega
awesome.
Yay.
Excellent. Yeah.
It was totally unanimous, I think it's fair to say. The Discord didn't stop exploding with new members for days, but also every single we didn't have a single bit of negativity. It's been like really, really astounding how well they captured so many of the different things, because we have so many different eras and people are fans of slightly different elements of it. Nobody feels left out. It's an absolute triumph.
That's awesome to hear. Was there any particular moment in the trailer for each of you guys that was the ultimate? I suspect I might know what it is, but I'm curious if your answers will be different.
No,
That's a hard
Ricky,
one.
Do you want to start?
Yeah. Of course, it's seeing their version of the Kedai Destroyer was epic, but I really like to see Satan as a character, and I was hoping for him. And also their rendition of the Lamassu was awesome to see as well. And it was just...
Talk about one hell of a glow up. The Lamassu is way better looking.
But don't you dare talk bad about the original one, though.
I'm not gonna talk bad about it. I just, I think the modern one is kind of, there's probably some Games Workshop artist that goes, yes, that's what I thought it should look like, but.
For me, it was the forges, actually. I mean, these views inside the Chaos Dwarf Demon Forge, how they assemble the war machines, the Iron Demons, the Red King Mortars. I love that. This is more than I would have hoped for. I mean, I was expecting that everything would look awesome on the actual battlefields and everything, but the stuff we got around it, very, very nice. I loved it very much.
Yeah, looking.
I think for me, sorry.
No, you're all good. But looking back at the trailer, that scene where they're not only assembling everything, but you get to see kind of all of the massive amount of Iron Demons and War Machines, and you can even catch the Warriors of Chaos, negotiating in the background. With them is just, it's such a clever piece of just storytelling without having to say anything.
Definitely, exactly.
The Infernal Guard.
The Infernal Guard.
It's okay. That's okay. The Infernal Guard being totally motionless is like a really important detail that makes it clear that they're like a cast apart. But actually, I think for me it was the opening voiceover. So it's really easy for people to get super excited by the Iron Demons and stuff and forget that like the interesting thing about the Chaos Dwarfs is their motivation is different from most of the other like evil chaos aligned factions, and that is that they were abandoned by their original gods. And that's something that we think about and talk about quite a lot because it feeds a lot of the behavior. To know from like minute one, word one of that voiceover that the dev team had like understood it, they'd understood the faction. You just knew the rest of it was going to be a hit because the soul of it was so clear that all of the detail kind of flows from that,
Yeah, which, speaking of the dev team, one thing I wanted to share with y'all that I think you would find wonderful and a little heartwarming is that when I was speaking to the devs about, like, Chaos Dwarf stuff, one of the things that they told me is that they actually watched through the Chaos Dwarf Q&A series, especially the last episode where we had the Chaos Dwarf community members online. And that was, like, a video that many of them had on while working on stuff because it was just kind of like it's just kind of one of those like easy access passion boosts. So they did really, really enjoy that over there. And
really cool.
They're always
how cool is that?
They're always shy about that they do really take looks at the communities scattered for all the Warhammer races to really like be able to enjoy like what those people are excited and looking forward to and stuff like that, which hopefully this one is, or the Chaos Force are going to be delivering on a lot of those expectations and hopes. I will say, the trailer was quite nice. I'm kind of the basic bitch. I got super excited by the Kedai roar and stuff at the end. It was just of all the sounds it could have made, I don't know why that just the way they went with it, where it really sounds like a metallic monstrosity, not anything natural. Was very, very well done, and it was just this is something I think that y'all especially will feel this way, but I know so many people have been waiting for Chaos Dwarf since Total War 1, was announced.
Yeah.
When the first Warhammer game, they were like, "Oh, I can't wait to see Chaos Dwarfs," and here we are. It took 7 years, but we got there.
Well, and I also think that CA dragged GW back to it with them. Right? And I think that's really important because you can feel the passion and drive for vintage stuff that if we had waited for GW to come back around to the concept themselves, seeing the actual literal box flags, the flags that you were supposed to cut out as cardboard from the box of your Lamassu being the back banners for Astrogoth. It's just absolutely amazing, and it's something that only CA would probably have dragged the creative influence to go all the way back to 95 and to look at that stuff.
Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to start with, kind of as our first real topic is how did y'all feel about? So there was a lot of debate, right? We talked about it when we had all the podcast members online. Where a lot of people were really worried about which version of the Chaos Dwarfs. Yeah, I like the book show off. Which version of the Chaos Dwarfs are we going to go with, right? Are they going to go with the Forge World, very, very serious looking, very Warrior of Chaos looking guys with the pure scale armor? Or are they going to go with the big hats? And instead we saw CA kind of came out and there's a fusion. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I love it. I mean, they really pulled it off. I mean, I was skeptical to be honest. I mean, just from if I look at the models on the tabletop, they have different style. I mean, but it also comes a lot from that comes with the way how we used to paint the old big head models. I mean, brighter colors, the goblin green bases, the flags, the banner poles. Whereas with the Legion of Asgore, everything automatically was dark and grim and lava pits and so I think they found a good way to say, well, if we present both in a similar overall aesthetic, they actually work together, and I think they pulled it off.
Yeah. We've spoken about nothing else for years now. Like as you said, since the first game released, and we're finally here. We're finally part of an actual game, be it tabletop or computer game. We're one of the living teams now, and what will they go with? And the mix they've chosen is kind of similar to also to the 3D prints companies that do proxies and the other model companies that have envisioned their version of a modern take on the Chaos Dwarfs, and it's a mix of both, and it's in the best of ways.
I think as well there was something about Tamakan. If you look at the events for the fandom, and none of us have been fans of the Chaos Dwarfs all the way through the 25, 30 years, because most of us were 5 years old when the 1994 Big Hat range was released, right? But nevertheless, with Tamakan is a beautiful piece of art, and we were spoiled. And they took away from us as much of the 94 range as they gave us that was new and cool. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Things were taken away in Tamakan that was sad. It wasn't that nobody likes the Tamakan stuff. Tamakan stuff is the best stuff, right? But things were taken away from us as being too juvenile or too childish or too cartoony, too 90s, too bright, right? And then what CA have done is they've said you can have both, which is something that we have been doing as a community the entire time. And you wouldn't get that any other way. Do you know what I mean? It takes a lot of will to say, I'm going to square this circle. Here's your gothic horror, and here's your buffoons with enormous hats. And you can have both, right?
Yeah.
And the artistic vision is not interrupted.
Yeah, and I really like the point you made of something I think a lot of people don't necessarily know about the Chaos Dwarves, and what kind of I think led to a lot of this hemming and hawing is that for a lot of Warhammer Fantasy races, things used to be a lot not in a bad way, just in a different way. Things used to be kind of a lot goofier back in 5th edition. You look at the old Lizardmen, right? And they were very different, not even recognizable for today's. But
old Slan, for instance.
Yeah, the Slan were literally just big goofy frogs. And then going into 6th edition, everything became way more serious. Like Games Workshop kind of figured out a new way to print miniatures, which I think when they had the ability to kind of create those slightly, well, compared to the time, they were moving from all of that pewter and metal to pure plastic in a lot of ways. And so a lot of ranges got a lot of these updates, but the Chaos Dwarfs didn't, they didn't make the boat because they didn't come out after 5th edition until Tarmacon. It was this very sudden, like, y'all didn't even get like the transition of 6th edition. You just went straight to 8th, which was like a whole nother beast where it's like, all right, we need to give these guys a monster that's so big that it'll never be good on tabletop because cannons are just going to snipe it. And we also need to give them like these like super serious looking models. And it was I think it was such a dramatic shift, where all the other races either had a very nice progression or they didn't finish the progression. Like the Bretonians, they only made it to 6 and then they stopped. The Beastmen made it to 7th and then they stopped. But y'all went from like 5th to 8th, which was such a crazy drastic change. But it is really impressive to see how CA kind of blended it. Like I think the biggest thing for me that jumps out is like, you got the classic hats, you got the classic faces and the beards, but the weapons and the shields are like really sexy on like the classic big hat dwarfs. Like I'll kind of I'll pull this over so people in the watching can see, but I'm sure y'all have seen it. But like the unit card art, is like absolutely spectacular and showing them side by side, and they look like the same faction, which is way more impressive to me. Like it may not sound impressive to people, but the fact that you can have an Infernal Ironsworn and a Chaos Dwarf Big Hat Warrior side by side, and you go, yeah, look, they look like they're in the same army. It's really impressive.
Yeah. Like, but all the expansions that have come in the Total War franchise, this feels like one of the most fleshy, like biggest expansions there is. Like we have so much in this expansion, and I'm really surprised that they went so hard with the hobgoblins. Like we got them all and some more. Like that took me by surprise. Like we're known for the Chaos Dwarfs with the hats, and that would have been enough for me, but they also went 100% with the hobgoblin part. Like, what more can you ask for?
Yeah, they left very, very... so that's we can go ahead and kind of pivot into talking about how do y'all feel about the roster? It's not... it's like 95%, 98%. The biggest missing characters, obviously, the Chaos Siege Giant, which a lot of people have been kind of discussing, but that's not A, unusual, and B, I highly suspect, personally, that it'll show up in the future, kind of like how we got the Bone Giant, I think about 6-ish months after the Tomb Kings came out. But other than that, like the Hobgoblin Bolt Thrower, which we're also missing the Spiachukka for the green skin, so that's also not super surprising. And is that everything? Is there anything else that's like really missing from the roster?
I think that's it. So Chaos Dwarfs always had. We rarely had something which would be considered a complete roster in fantasy anyway. It was always a partway thing and a scratch build and some. So I think for me everything is there. Sure, the Siege Giant, give it to me, give it to me now. But with the rest, I think I would be fine. I apparently we are able to build fantastic war machines and the Iron Demon brains and everything like it. That's good. We have hobgoblins. I think even there are orcs, something like that. So it looks good for me.
I think if I could just pick up where I think we got to about the roster, so that I dropped out. No, apologies, guys. Look, I think we were worried that we were actually going to lose the hobgoblins entirely. Worried they were going to get spun off into a Carnate style faction, and also because the army is extremely versatile from a game balance standpoint, right? Not having played the beta or anything, but like the army has light cav, heavy cav, monstrous cav. It's got artillery, big and small. It's got magic. It's got heavy infantry, and it's got ranged. You know what I mean? It doesn't have light infantry and skirmishing, but you're spoiled for choice when you look at that roster because you've got something to do almost everything. Do you know what I mean? You've got skirmishers, you've got your hobgoblins, you've got your chaff, you've got your heavy infantry to back things up. There are so many different ways you can build a Chaos Dwarf army. And I think what's so fun about the roster that they've gone with is we're going to be able to do that. Like most members of CDO, they have their slave army, but then they also have their big heavy infantry army. And from that perspective, like there's so much variety that missing something like the siege giant and the hobgoblin, like bolt thrower, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't sting because those aren't integral to the vision.
Right.
Also, one thing I found when you look at the Warhammer Armies project books, which have it all, like it has everything, every unit with every kind of weapon.
Everything.
It's nothing is special when everything has everything.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, it doesn't hurt to cut it down a little bit.
Yeah, I think there are always people that kind of come out of the woodwork and they're like, man, dwarves would be so much better if they had like halberds and if they had cavalry. And it's like, well, yeah, but they wouldn't really be dwarves at that point,
Right.
But yeah, that's really good to hear. I definitely can kind of see, I think from CA's perspective, why those two units in particular were probably kind of a lower priority. As much as I think a lot of people love giants, they're not very popular units for a lot of people that play the game. Either in the single player and multiplayer community, there's pretty constant chatter about how useless giants are, and they really struggle. Granted, I think the Chaos Dwarf Siege Giant kind of solves a lot of the giant problems because it's so heavily armored. But I do think that's something we can look forward to seeing in the future. And I also am curious what they would do to really make the bolt throwers useful when you have so many other war machines.
Yeah.
Well, the point of the bolt thrower, from my perspective, is really you have it so that you can have hobgoblin subfaction, and the hobgoblin subfaction is not totally hopeless at several key tasks. But I do think the big thing, the single thing that's missing that nobody's talking about, interestingly enough, because I think to Total War fans it doesn't even make sense, but almost every Chaos Dwarf player is Black Orcs. And ready access to Black Orcs is a really important part of most tabletop armies. And for very good reasons, I don't think anyone's expecting them to be included at a later date. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not as flavorful.
Right.
But almost everyone has Black Orcs, and they are really useful if you're playing on the tabletop, interestingly enough, especially in the early editions.
It wouldn't work time-wise, though, with Grimgor Ironhide being like his own faction and out of it. Like lore-wise and time-wise, Grimgor has escaped, and the Black Orcs isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a subject of debate as to like whether you continue to have access to them and they're mercenaries, whether you continue to have access to them because you keep making your own Black Orcs and trying to perfect it, or whether you just set it anywhere in the thousands of years of history. But the truth is that the roster doesn't need them. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
There's not so many different options.
Yeah. We do have the, luckily nowadays in Total War, we do have the allied recruitment system. So if there are any players that are like, they're like, I really want Black Orcs in my army, all you gotta do is basically get yourself some greenskins under your boot, and you can have four Black Orc units per army, baby.
And I mean, getting them under your boot is pretty much the spirit of the entire early game, I would hope. Right? That's pretty much all we do.
Yeah, the Slaves of Tsar Greenskins faction they've been having a great time, having a house party while the folks were gone, but they're coming home now. It's gonna be a rude awakening. But yeah, that's awesome. So I think my next question for y'all would be, how are y'all feeling about the character choice? So there was a lot, just probably infinite amounts of speculation going into the, as there is always with every single DLC, about who the leading characters will be. While they're not the end all be all of content, they are kind of the flagships and the attention grabbers. And so here we see that, we got Zatan the Black being your classic tank and spank melee lord, who is like very brightly colored, very classic, like just he's very poppy, despite the fact that I think personality-wise, he is by far the most grim and horrifying of the three. And then you've got, Astrogoth Ironhand, literally the classic, the OG, the big boss himself, who did not, I think a lot of people were almost kind of expecting him to get kind of like a redesign, but they actually just took his classic design and just tuned it up a bit, made it more serious looking. And man, he's got some crazy animations that we've already seen already. Just absolutely beautiful animations on him. And then, of course, Drazoath the Ashen being the, the lead figure for the Tarmogon supplement. And then Gorda's Backstabber coming out with one of the most absolutely terrifying looking faces I think I've ever seen on a creature. So how do y'all feel about the character selection they went with? We'll kind of touch on the whole 3 legendary lord and 1 legendary hero thing in a little while. Right now I'm kind of more curious on your thoughts about the actual individuals. Like, we do see that Gorth the Cruel is in the game. He represents the 1 NPC faction, being the guys who are actually in control of Zar Nagrand at the start of the game, it seems. So what are y'all thoughts on the character choice? Whoever wants to jump in.
Let me start. Personally, I like that we have a hobgoblin as a god of backstabber. I think that was important. I mean, if you include the hobgoblin subfaction, then give them a hero character. I like that. As to the main 3 guys, I think it's a decent choice. I mean, it was Astrogoth was to be expected. I mean, he's famous. He was always the prime guy. Drazoath as the new guy from Tamercan, so they had to include him in this. There was no way around it. Say. And if you have Gordos, you need Zatan. So I think it's okay for me. The whole 3 lords is another thing, but just from the selection point of view, for me it's okay.
What do you think, Linus?
Yeah, I got a lot to say about everything. But with the Gordos, especially, it's like he is the hobgoblin that we have, and I'm real curious about how his stats will be in the game. With the hobgoblins, with their scar tissue in the back, because they backstab each other all the time, and he has the most scar tissue and is the toughest. And like his special rule in the tabletop with the final wound that he takes, like on a 4+, you don't take it. I wonder if it's gonna be something similar in the Total War, like when he has a little bit of health, that he gets really, really tanky, or something fun like that. So it's amazing to see Gordos. And the Drazoath, it's nothing to say about that. It's just great, and I hope, he had his special mount and everything. Gonna be fun to unlock that, and I'm curious to see. Speaking of the roster, if the Infernal Guard part of the roster will be Drazoath the Ashen specific, like will he be able to have the helmeted guys, and the others will have the hat guys, because they all have, like, if you look at the roster, we have hatted Chaos Dwarfs with Great Axe, and we have Infernal Guard with Great Axe, and they have the same weapons except the Fire Glaive, which only Infernal Guard has. So what do you think about that?
I will say what I suspect they're going to do is they're probably going to pull like kind of the classic Total Warism, which is that you're going to have like your quote unquote basic tier infantry, which will be your chaos. Well, actually it'll be your hobgoblins. And then your medium tier infantry is going to be your Chaos Dwarf warriors. And then above them, probably from a different building tree, will be your Infernal Guard. And then above them at the tippy top will be the Infernal Ironsworn, is what it's looking like. And then with the Immortals up there, though the Immortals might be a regiment of renown. I'm not exactly sure, based on the count, whether there's a Hobgoblin unit that's wearing black robes, and then there's the Infernal Ironsworn, or the Immortals. One of them is a regiment of renown, but I don't know which.
I mean, the black robes, I've been really surprised people don't just think that those are just sneaky gits.
And that very well could be what it is. Like they could just be regular stinky gits.
And that's certainly because I think they've got 2 knives in the unit card. But
yeah,
there you go.
But I heavily suspect that personally, I do suspect that the Immortals are going to be the ROR. I was kind of hoping to get them as a generic unit. That way you could have a lot of them. But on the other hand, if you have them as a regiment of renown, you can make them like really crazy. Because in that case, they would
maybe it's more fun.
Yeah, in that case, they could essentially be like a very offensive Regiment of Renown version of the Ironsworn. In that they have a similar stat line, but instead of shields, they're all, we're gonna chop your face off. But yeah, that's how I suspect the roster will work. You'll probably have like a basic warrior building that's tier 1 through 3 or 2 to 3 that has your warriors, and then you'll have like a tier 3 to 4 building that has your Ironsworn and or your Infernal Guard, and you'll mix it up how you like.
Yeah, but because as you said, with the Tamil Khan book, it's quite its own. It stands on its own leg and has its own style. And with it being the Drasrath, the leader, and everything below is kind of like. Can you say that it's kind of a prison? With they get the mask and the mask of shame, and they have to prove themselves. Yeah, they're exiled. So, and the taller hat you have, the higher up you are in the society. So, shouldn't they be like the lowest tier? Like, I don't know, but we'll see.
From a cultural perspective, they would be the lowest tier, but I think from a who's the best at murdering people on the battlefield, it's going to be a little different. That being said, though, I do suspect you'll probably see things like, I would be shocked to see, like, I bet Zatan is going to be very good at taking your like warriors and probably your hobgoblins and making them like have a lot of unique synergies and buffs with them to make them very scary. Whereas Draswath is going to be like, yeah, you want to take Infernals, with Draswath, because he's probably going to buff them to high heavens, and then Astrogoth will probably be more your Kadai and your war machines and stuff like that.
Yeah. Speaking of Satan, like Satan the Black, I really hope that they would include him, and they did. But why is nothing about him black, and why doesn't he use the Warhammer that he has in the rules? Like, what's up with the axe and shield?
It's possible he'll unlock it.
Yeah, I hope so.
I will say I suspect Zatan is probably going to suffer from what I like to call Archon the Black syndrome, which is that there are occasionally characters that have from a really specific lore standpoint, there's something about them that's really famous. Like Archon the Black is typically called that because he's a charred black skeleton, but in Total War he's not. He's just kind of like a regular skeleton. And that happened because in later iterations of the miniature, Games Workshop didn't paint him as a black skeleton anymore. In all their books, they painted him regular. So part of me suspects what likely happened is either just due to like cultural zeitgeist or Games Workshop. Somebody was like, hey, we need a picture of Zatan the Black. And someone at GW looked and was like, oh, we have a mini that someone at some point at a tournament has submitted as Zatan the Black, or from our archives. Here he is, even though that's not actually what he would look like from purely looking at his story, for instance. So
it's the wiki. Yeah. It's the wiki's fault, by the way, because that piece of art being on that page of the rule book, I don't know if you have it to hand, Lakey. They have modeled Zatan the Black on the picture of a generic Chaos Dwarf hero that is on the same page as the text for Zatan the Black. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but that miniature wasn't sold as Zatan, whereas Astrogoth was very clearly sold as Astrogoth.
Yeah.
And in that context, I got no issue with it. And not having a black beard, I think the beard straighteners are something that we've kind of cottoned onto a little bit, like in the last 48 hours or so, that like both Astrogoth and Zatan have like ironed out the curls of their beards. And in the case of Zatan having a grey beard, again, that's kind of implied by the art. I'm comfortable with it, but I kind of wonder if it's an aesthetic choice they made. I mean, we can see some reasons they might have made it, but I also wonder if it's because they want that strong contrast to the Order Dwarfs. They want them to look very much more similar and less like they've gone off on a distinct ethnic group, which I can understand.
It could be.
But if someone can make a mod to put my beard curls back in, I will be downloading that mod.
I would be shocked not to see that in fairly quickly, especially if they're present on any of the other like little guys. Part of me it was interesting to see how many Whitebeards show up. A part of me wonders if like they're trying to denote like different ages or like have a little more contrast between the three characters. Where like, because each, like when you look at them in the trailer, each of their beards are actually very iconic compared to one another. When you have like Drasrath, Zatan, and Astrogoth right next to one another. So part of me wonders if they were trying to kind of differentiate them a little bit. Because this, like Zatan's got that crazy tornado beard. Like he's got like a cyclone for a beard, which is definitely a very unique design. But Chitsko, what are your thoughts on like the actual character selection? Just because I know we haven't gotten around to you yet about it.
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I think obviously we're all hoping that there will be a fourth legendary lord in due time. I think that's just because over time you want that variety of start pods and stuff like that.
Right.
I think that I want to see how they execute Drazoath. Because if you spend a lot of time reading Tamakan, and we've had like a decade of no releases with which to read Tamakan over and over and over again, got to remember that Drazoath is hugely disproportionately thought about in the fan base compared to how he's thought about in Chaos Dwarf Society, right? Chaos Dwarf Society, he's taken a serious knock to his career. He is he's on the outs, basically. And the fact that he's got a giant fire-breathing bull that can fly is very normal. You know what I mean? Cinder Breath is very cool. Cinder Breath being the most powerful Bale Taurus ever is something that I hope that people can compensate for, if that makes sense, because he shouldn't be. He's just the one they made a miniature of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, classic,
so
classic,
from that
like
perspective,
he's got a name. That's what's really
yeah, and one of the things we enjoy the most about it is when you read Legion of Asgore lore in Tamakan, this is a group of people who are on the outskirts of their society, who are doing particularly badly, who get rolled over by a Nurgle horde, right? It's just a normal day in Warhammer world. They're not magic. He's not the paragon in the way that Astrogoth is. And so seeing them go with Astrogoth and have his struggle with the Conclave be his storyline really put a lot of faith in me again in the way that they'd understood the vision, because you need to have Astrogoth in the center in order to make what's going on with the Legion of Asgore actually interesting.
Yeah.
They're not the be all and end all, and so I feel like the balance of that is pretty great, to be honest.
Yeah, a part of me, based on kind of what they've been talking about and stuff, I'm expecting. I don't know which way they're gonna do it, because there's two ways they could do it. I'm curious if they're gonna have it where Astrogoth is exceptionally good at the new conclave mechanic they've introduced, where you're kind of you're vying for seats, and every seat gives you some different powers that you're able to claim, and then you like kind of want to work together with the others so you can unlock the more powerful seats faster, but at the same time you want to usurp their seats if there's a particular power you really want. I'm curious if they're going to make it where Astrogoth is particularly good at it, or if they're going to make Drazoath particularly bad at it. I don't think they're going to do both, but I'm kind of leaning towards I think that they'll make Astrogoth better at it, because that's probably, because generally speaking, you want to be careful when making like a faction or a character bad at something, because that can lead to like player frustration.
Yeah.
But it is I was very excited for the conclave mechanic. Like the idea that it's also your unique faction confederation, where it's like you manage to take over enough seats in the Tower of Zar that you're like, you listen to us now, like we're in charge. It allows for some really, really, really interesting. I'm just happy to see a confederation mechanic. That's always very important to me with a faction. There a lot of people out there are very fond of their gotta catch them all with their legendary lords. Yeah, actually, I guess let's just go there. How are y'all feeling about the mechanics we've seen so far? As far as they haven't shown us everything yet, but they have shown us the conclave, and they've also shown us the tech tree, which is wild. Because y'all don't get one tech tree, you have 3 tech trees. How are y'all feeling about mechanics wise? What the gameplay's looking like for the Chaos Dwarfs?
Scared.
Scared? Why are you scared?
Yeah. Like, I played the game since it first came out, but I've won like 2 campaigns in all these years. I'm so bad at this game, and like having so many mechanics, it's gonna be a hoot.
Well, you know what? You'll be like a classic Demon Smith, sink or swim.
I think
go. Go.
Oh no, go ahead, Jesko.
What I really love to see is that they have this workforce mechanic in it, so that you have to have a look on your. Do I have enough man or goblet power to actually sustain my diabolical empire, which I'm about to erect here.
Yeah,
just turn out war machine after war machine, and they will crumble. This I really like. This is really good.
Yeah, the economy is very like for a Total War Warhammer faction is super advanced.
Yeah.
Where you're balancing your number of laborers versus the amount of raw materials you have versus the amount of armament you're producing versus like how much money you've got. Like it's whoo.
And this for me really, I mean, this really fits with the old Chaos Dwarf background or law. I mean, if you think about what makes the Chaos Dwarf different from, for example, Dark Elves or other very, very bad bad people. Chaos Dwarfs have this industrial take on it. They have like they make it. They have like all the people they subjugate and take back as slaves. They're just part of this whole machinery. They become fodder for their industrial labor. I really love that they took this and made this part of the mechanic instead of just telling us that this is the case. Oh, by the way, everything you do is built on the backs of like your slave labory. They really have it as a mechanic, which I like that touch. That's cool.
What are your thoughts, Jiskoy?
If there was a big 3 or a big 4 of mechanics, then it would be, just from beyond the veil of ignorance, right? If they hadn't shown us what they'd shown us, it would be power struggles between the Sorcerer Prophets. Massive tick. Fantastic. Slaves and sacrifice, and the balance between the utility of slaves and the sacrifice of sacrifice. I feel like that's in there. It's like the only Total War faction where having a complex economy feels like the right thing to be doing, and I think that's great. The one thing that and I talked to Indy about this a long time ago, and we've been mulling it over ever since. Petrification. Petrification is the one thing that perhaps cannot be fun in a Total War game. That is totally fundamental to the psychology of a Sorcerer Prophet. That is probably going to have to be absent in the same way that so much about tabletop miscasting, which is basically where petrification happens to you when you're a Chaos Dwarf player, is you'll be playing along and then your guy will turn into stone and that's it. And that's quite fun when it happens on the tabletop. Like Jasko and I, we've done that to each other, playing tabletop with each other. But like, I just don't know if it can have a place. Everything else, big ticks, you know?
Yeah, and you know, it kind of leans into like a little bit of a historical fact for anyone that loves the Total War Warhammer series. But in the original Total War Warhammer 1, when it was being developed, they had a misfire mechanic. So war machines could misfire just like they could tabletop. But unfortunately, what they found was when they were putting it through like playtesters and stuff like that, if people didn't understand the history of the mechanic, they hated it. Like, oh my god, they hated misfiring so much. It was such a frustrating mechanic.
I hate it too, and I know the history of it. I still hate it after 25 years. I mean, I can relate. I mean,
right. As a Lizardman player, I was always like, oh man, that looks like it sucks. All I did was eat 2 skinks. But, you know, it's so, you know, I do think petrification is unfortunately kind of going to be one of those casualties. However, I do suspect it'll probably appear in the skill tree. I would not be surprised to see it be like an ability that if you take it, will do something like it improves like either how much Winds of Magic you can have or how like fast your power recharge rate or something is like that, but it increases your chance of miscasting as it like, I guess, represents your sorcerer. Like, is he more risk reward? So like, yeah, sure, you get more magic, but you're going to have like an additional 10% chance to blow yourself up because the miscast system in Warhammer is a little weird. In that it's not very well explained, I think tends to be its big issue because like it exists and it can actually be very detrimental if you're in a pretty serious fight and you accidentally ping yourself for like 500 damage. And also has like a random modifier where it can only happen generally if you're miscast or overcasting, though it can happen if there's like some kind of modifier on the table, like an enemy is increasing your miscast chance or whatever. But the amount of damage it does is a surprisingly large scale, but the game never explains what the scale is. Like it can be like as little as like 50 to 100 health, and I've seen it sometimes for like 600 to 800 health. Like I've seen my skink priest just go because he had the misfortune of miscasting. But I do agree with your thoughts that it's kind of one of those things. It'd be, I'm sure it would be so fun if it was like they had a passive where they had an increased chance of miscasting, but if they do miscast, they get like plus 20 armor for the rest of the campaign or something.
Yeah.
But
like, can we compare it to the Sword of Cain somehow? Like it has, you do a thing and it gains a buff, but it also is a debuff in some ways.
I mean,
I think the thing for me is just the psychology of it, right? Astrogoth, you can do it through his storyline. The key thing to understand is that these guys are living on borrowed time, and that every time they level up, and every time the bigger the spell you cast, the more of yourself you give away, and that trade-off puts Astrogoth's campaign goals, story-wise, narrative-wise, into a different light. Because this is a guy who is at the end of his existence as a soul, and everything he is doing is more violent and aggressive, and it's faster. And whereas you have these younger guys who can afford to bide their time a little bit more, and everyone's trying not to cast big spells all the time, because if you're casting big spells, you're turning yourself to stone. And to hear that they did reference it, they did talk about it in Astrogoth's backstory, and I think that's really important. But I'm going to be really interested to see how it plays out, even if it's just on his skill tree or whatever, because as you say, so there's only so many things they can do with it.
Like if you can choose between going more magic and then they lose it through time, and or maybe like get less melee focused or more. I don't know what we'll do, but if you could choose it somehow. But he is already like petrified, all his legs and his hands, so he doesn't have. But he moves fast.
Hey, the joys of mechanization.
Yeah. And that represents the rules.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about Astrogoth a bit, because he's the only legendary lord we've really got a big look at. He's had that like good 20-minute long like mechanics reveal. They also had all that lovely battle footage of him literally just like leaping 15 feet in the air and ground pounding people. And I literally have seen an animation where he punts someone into the air, jumps up, grabs them, and then slams them onto the ground, which, like, good lord, he's dunking people.
Okay.
So how do y'all feel about the it's a very interesting take on a dwarf. He definitely stands out. And he's like spewing fire on his hand and throwing it like it's a flamethrower. How do y'all feel about the Astrogoth design and animations and stuff? Just go ahead. Let's start with you
I
this
think
time.
when I look at him, I do think it's a level of physicality that almost was beyond what you imagined when you play on the tabletop. Do you know what I mean? Because when you play on the tabletop with Astrogoth, he's this wizard who walks around in the way that wizards normally walk around in a game of 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy, which is carefully, right? And he's got a low move speed. You don't want to get him into melee. And it's almost like you have like your old grandpa kind of trundling around on this thing. And something that I hadn't imagined, I think the hazardousness of it and the anger of it that comes through in the way that they've designed it really, really excited me in a way that I'd never thought. Of course, Astrogoth is furious all the time. Of course, when he hits you with his arm that has turned to stone, he just fury was something that came through in the anime, and I thought that was really special. But you can also see that it's just a labor of love,
Yeah. He is faster though. Compared to the other dwarves in the rules, he has the movement of 6, and like the death blow special attack when it goes into overdrive and pounds and smash and stab. Like when I reread this with the eyes of that he is a fast guy that punches people, I get it. Like it works also, but it was not the way I envisioned it when I came into it. If you know.
Well, and I'm sure for a lot of people when they hear Astrogoth described or read his stuff. I remember one of the kind of the big discussions that I had with various people about like if he was going to get a redesign is, you know, the kind of one of the last real Chaos Dwarf things we saw in fantasy was the Road of Skulls Gotrek and Felix book by Josh Reynolds, where that is true, but that actually isn't what I want to talk about. My brain just betrayed me. The Wulfric novel also has Chaos Dwarfs, and the Wulfric novel very famously developed some stuff we haven't really seen outside of that book, and in it there's a character who's basically discount Astrogoth, but he kind of has more of like a 40k dreadnought version of a suit, a mecha suit, instead of Astrogoth's system. And so I think for a lot of people it's like, oh well, you know, compared to Astrogoth, this one is so much cooler because you think of like this slow plodding, you know, sarcophagus of metal that's like basically unbreakable, but it's crushing people or whatever. But I love that instead they looked at him and they saw how much leaner his machine is and said, nah man, he's fast. Like, he's still freakishly strong. Like, hydraulics, especially if they're powered by lava somehow, are way scarier than you think. But it's like, he's so fast, and he's still very heavily armored. His body's made of stone. He doesn't care, you know, if you're going to stab him with a sword. He's like, I'm made of stone. I don't give... I've only got... This is my only vulnerable bits. And he's like a horror movie villain, where he's just so freakishly fast and able to get in there and just start tearing through hordes of enemies. It really is such a delight. It's not at all what I expected. And it is, but it's a delightful interpretation.
Definitely. I mean, honestly, I think they took a little creative license there in just like they wanted to have him faster than Zatan, I guess. So I could see that they thought, okay, here we have a chance. He has a mechanical, hydraulic, robotic legs thing. Let's make him faster, have him run with the bolt centaurs instead of slumbering in the back like he did in Days of the Past in earlier editions. So I think it's a little bit of that. But yeah, it works. It works. And I mean, just on that, we know, had Chaos Dwarfs had a 7th or 8th edition release, proper release for fantasy, we know that Astrogoth would have been like the complete Gaskell treatment. Absolutely. Of like he would have really have a different model than we had.
Yeah, I am really glad they updated his original design instead of putting him just in a 40k dreadnought, because it's very unique and very iconic. You know, I think it's important to keep that where we can. You know, there are times where you want bigger and badder. But there are also times where it's important to look and be like, how do we keep the original spirit of this character intact? But still make it absolutely terrifying, you know? I have no doubt that Zatan could absolutely crush an orc with the hammer of Hashut, you know, when he's using all of that force behind it.
Sure.
So beyond that, is there anything y'all... no, I did remember the point. So as far as his design goes, kind of the last really big thing we do see is that they do seem to run with that idea that Astrogoth, because he's so much older and he's so much of his body's petrified, he's a lot more cautious now when using spells. So he doesn't have the full lore of Hashut. He instead has a mix. He's got the lore of fire and the lore of Hashut, kind of, which seems to, you know, kind of be leaving the door open for Draswath to be the pure lore of Hashut guy. Do y'all think that's like a good way to kind of interpret that little storyline where it's like he doesn't unleash maybe the most powerful spells from the lore of Hashut, but instead mixes in the lore of fire, so he's got some like safer things to reach for?
I wouldn't mind if he didn't cast spells at all. Like, if he was so careful with it that if he did it, he took damage automatically or something.
When I write my sad little fan fiction novella on CDO, and I always think about the psychology of the sorcerer prophet whenever you depict one, and it always comes down to they've got to be smart enough to save the magic for the moment where it really counts. And I find that restriction really flavorful because it helps to drive that wedge between Drazoath, who's at a different stage of his life, and Astrogoth, who is struggling with something that will never be undone, but also full of the hubris to say he wants to turn backwards. And I think it's really nice to see that reflected in gameplay, because the temptation to have him be this Teclis of Hashut, do you know what I mean? This, like, he's the high priest, and therefore his magic is the biggest magic. He's the sorcerer prophet, the supreme one. Therefore, he should be able to cast the spell that ends the enemy army. It's like, it doesn't work that way. This is a bad deal that they struck with Hashut. This is a bad deal forever, and you can never get out of it. And to force the player to acknowledge that at least gives you back something that you can't have if you don't have your characters randomly turning to stone in the middle of turn 3, right? Which is obviously where our minds go.
Yeah, and I do think it worked out very nicely that they're able to go, okay, well, since he's got the mecha suit, we can make him a melee powerhouse who's very heavily armored. He seems like he's very well designed to deal with like hordes of enemies, and will probably be like, he's probably going to hit pretty hard. Or he's a true hybrid. The wizards that are also extremely good melee combatants are relatively rare, especially because a lot of them rely on mounts. But Astrogoth doesn't. He's just like, nope, don't need that business. I'm just gonna get in there and start pounding faces. The kind of, I think the last thing that I saw that really jumped out at me, though I'd love to open the floor to y'all about anything that jumped out at you after this, from the Astrogoth reveal, is we did see that there are 2 lord choices, 2 generic lords. We do have, of course, the Sorcerer Prophet, which everyone expected, but we also have the Chaos Dwarf Overseer, which appears to be I would assume, the melee variant, so probably like the generic version of Zatan. Which is, that's a fun title. Instead of just the Chaos Dwarf Lord, we got the Overseer, which is a very nice. I always love when they have original, or like unique monikers for their character types. Like, when you have a Dwarf Lord and a Bretonnian Lord, it's kind of like, we could try a little harder.
Noble.
So were y'all at all surprised or pleased to see that there's kind of that generic melee lord as well, instead of it just being the sorcerer prophets?
No, the Chaos of Lord or Overlord or Overseer, depends on which army book you're looking at. It's important. I mean, it's your main melee lord choice. I think. I mean, what is a little sad is that we lack so there is no Bull Centaur lore level. So this would have been something which would have, personally, I would have loved to have followed that line of Chaos Dwarf society to its final conclusion, having like an uber big Bull Centaur lord. Because Bull Centaurs, apart from just being awesome, so iconic, so important for the lore, for the background. This is something I wish I would really have loved, but maybe together with the CG design.
Yeah, and we do see the Bull Centaur Tarek, but it looks to be a hero choice,
exactly,
as opposed to a lord choice.
Exactly. That's the hero level, which is fine. Good that we have him. Very important guy in the roster. Yeah, for sure.
That kind of brings us on to one of the things that people aren't thinking to talk about quite a lot, which is we were quite surprised not to see Shator. And if you had asked me to guess the 4 legendary lords, I probably would have my pick for 4th slot would have been either Ogla Khan or some kind of hobgoblin only Goblin Khan in a kind of Skarsnik role,
right?
Or Shator. And that's because we basically, as a community, struggled to remember that Shator was released after AOS was launched, because it was so obvious to us that it was part of the design work that went into the Tamakan release to create Shator the Executioner, which, if you're not aware of him, guys, you can Google him, but like, he's the giant bull centaur named character, the only one we ever had.
Yeah, gorgeous skull.
And he's so... absolutely beautiful, right? And enormous, by the way. Anyone who's looking at it on Google, you have to understand how big Shator is compared to even the Bull Centaur renders. But like, yeah, we kind of assumed it would either be that or like a Silostra style Bull Centaur Lord that they came up with themselves. And I think I will be holding a candle for that concept. If I could ask for one thing in a DLC to the DLC, it would probably be a named Bull Centaur.
But when you think about him, the Tamarkan book was supposed to have a follow-up book, right? It was campaign books. Right. Do you think that Shar-Tor the Executioner would have come in one of those? Because the sculpt was ready with the Tamarkan, right? But it wasn't included in the book.
Right.
So, the same way the Destroyer was sculpted but never launched. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. So for anyone in that's listening and is wondering what the hell we're talking about, so Tamarkan was a Forge World exclusive campaign book that was released alongside Warhammer Fantasy. It wasn't the only book they ever released. They also released the Monsters Arcanum, which followed up from Tamarkan, which just added in a bunch of like super badass monsters, and it also took like the Chaos Dwarf monsters and like expanded on them some more and cleaned up some of their rules and gave them more options. But we know for a fact, based on writings in the Tamarkan book, as well as interviews that were done with the authors afterwards, that Tamarkan was supposed to be the first of 4 books. There was going to be one for each Chaos God. So Tamarkan was the Nurgle book, and then there were supposed to be 3 more books that each focused on a different Chaos invasion in a different part of the world, because they all happened kind of simultaneously, because they were all competing over the throne of Chaos, which is the whole point of Tamarkan, is that he's going for the throne by taking the city of Nuln, but he fails, and so his 3 brothers, who there's one for Tzeentch, one for Khorne, one for Slaanesh, were also going to attempt this goal, but in other places of the world. However, Warhammer Fantasy unfortunately got canceled during this time, which was a horrible blow to, of course, any and all fans. But it was already confirmed that there were a number of sculpts already completed for the next book, including most likely Shar-Tor. And we even knew there was like a 4th or 3rd Battle of Blackfire Pass book, which is where the Giant River Troll Hag and the Squid Gaba came from. Which the Giant River Troll Hag was, and it's weird because like the Giant River Troll Hag did not come out for fantasy, really. It kind of came out afterwards because it didn't release with the book. There's no published book anywhere that has rules for the Giant River Troll Hag. It doesn't exist because her book never came out. But she did get included in Total War Warhammer as a generic hero for the Greenskin roster, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we have had it confirmed by Creative Assembly that Games Workshop, when they came to Games Workshop and wanted to use Shar-Tor, Games Workshop said, no, he's an Age of Sigmar character. Which the only reason I can possibly think of them doing that is that, we have a lot of hints coming up about AOS Chaos Dwarfs. They're building up to it big time in recent times. And maybe Shar-Tor is going to be returning with a plastic sculpt.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, he's an AOS character. No, he's not. He's gone. There's
I know.
No
it's like point to a single, literally point me to a single line of text anywhere in the world where it says Shar-Tor exists in AOS.
Exactly.
Yeah, but because he's an AOS character, I've seen him and played in tournaments. Like for me, he was never a fantasy character, and I would never think he to be included in the Total War. I thought maybe like the Master of Madness or one of them real old sculpts would be some kind of re-envisioned as a cool lord with his own kind of lore, because they've done it before with the whole Vampire Coast faction, and like they can do their own stuff. We know that.
Yeah, I do very much hope, and I could tell y'all I have blown up some very unfortunate people's emails, politely of course, that I would literally sell one of my kidneys to get a Bull Centaur Legendary Lord, even if it's an original character. But I'll never forget being at a bar in Horsham for the Vampire Coast release. I was over there, and like the looks on their faces about Solosha Deerfon when it's like, how did y'all have fun with that? And they were just like, because just the approval process of creating an original character, sending it to Games Workshop, getting notes back from Games Workshop about no, that won't work, this needs to change, and them going, okay, change the character again, send it back, they send it back, okay, you need to do this, send it back, and they're just like nightmare.
And that is part of why we were scared about this DLC. We were reticent about it, right? And we've been talking about it not just since we spoke to you, but on Brazen Broadcasts going back to the very beginning of the modern version of the show. Like, we've worried about it because of the propensity for GW to take it in a direction that ruined it somehow. And C8 have absolutely nailed it on here. And I think if they do come back to the concept of a Bull Centaur Legendary Lord, I think they will get it right. I think, the only thing that we've interpreted this Shartor thing is very obviously means that he's going to be used in Oathbreakers. But like the idea that the Legion of Asgore War Scroll for AOS counted as being taken seriously by Games Workshop is a fallacy, right? That was an afterthought War Scroll. And Late Tide knows this better than me because he plays AOS and you've played that War Scroll and you know how uncompetitive it is, right? It was just a classic piece of shelfware.
It was in the Swedish team, like Tears Wars played for the Swedish team 1 year, I think. So they were competitive for like a month there.
Yeah, that's going to be the case with a lot of the legacy units. The legacy units being the kind of like the older rosters that carried over, is that there was a little time they were competitive, and the Games Workshop was like, okay, we're going to stop pretending to care about these now.
yeah, we're not selling these anymore. But that's the key thing, right? Because they carried on.
Oh, no, go ahead.
They carried on selling Asgore stuff off the Forge World store for some time into AOS 1, which was good because we all knew that we had to buy it now. Because it was really obvious that they were not going to be coming back for it. But now all of that stuff is gone. You know what I mean? Not just the Asgore stuff, but like almost all of the previous fantasy stuff that was on the Forge World store is gone.
Yeah,
from that perspective,
the last year especially, they pulled everything off. Like Tarmacon stuff, I think, was on there till about halfway through 2nd edition AOS. And
you could plausibly take it in your Nurgle army for AOS, and they had Putrid Blight Lords and all that kind of stuff. And then also you could plausibly use it in 40k if you wanted to.
And then they had, of course, the a lot of the monsters, which were on there until very recently. Yeah. Like the Dread Saurian only got taken down like in the last, I want to say like 6 months. Which it seems very like, we know Forge World is heading up a lot of the old world. Though they have confirmed that they're doing plastic, which is really nice, at least for the like regular units, which we saw in the most recent article with the Bretonians and the Tomb Kings. But it seems that they're clearing space. They really do seem to be getting rid of everything they don't absolutely need to kind of make way for what's coming. But so just kind of opening up the floor to you guys, is there anything about the Chaos Dwarfs that you are kind of like wondering about, or is there anything that you saw in the trailer, the gameplay footage, or any of the stuff that's kind of jumped out at you? We do still have a couple of unsolved mysteries. Like, we don't know what armaments are really for yet. We've seen them, and they were very cheeky about, oh, look, here's a mechanic for the armaments are for, but they didn't click on it because they're jerks. And we did, of course, see that there's some kind of railway mechanic that looks very similar to Cathay's convoy system, or caravan system. The Chaos Dwarf one is called Convoys, but we're not 100% sure what that is yet. Is there anything that really leaps out at y'all?
So,
Nikki, you're the...
If you read Amakan, the reason why the convoys idea interests me, we really do, guys. We have really been reading nothing but Tamakan for 10 years. We've just read it over and over again, but it's a beautiful book and it's worth a lot of money because we're all trying to buy a copy. Genuinely, though, everyone knows the moment that they moved. They moved from a digital copy of Tamakan to a physical copy, and it's a beautiful moment in any Chaos Dwarf Online member's career. But look, let's be super clear, right? These are slavers, and when they go on campaign, they harvest slaves. And we know that we have Dark Elves doing that in CA already, but like in Tamarkan, it's super clear. Once they get through the pass and they've beaten the Night Goblins, it is explicitly stated that the Chaos Dwarfs set up trading posts all the way through, all the way back to the Darklands, and they're funneling villagers from the Central Empire during Tamarkan's campaign with all the Nurgle stuff going on, and they're funneling them back to Zana Grund. And I wondered if that might be something that doesn't make it. And I wondered how they would disentangle slaving as an activity from everything that is going on, obviously, with the Greenskins. And I think it's probably not going to make the cut. But I would be interested to see how the train railway network thing manifests, because that is the only reference to it in the book, right? So CA will have been reading Tamarkan back to front, and that's where they would have gotten that idea from. The only thing is that that's obviously intended to be used specifically for harvesting slaves.
Yeah, I'm very curious if it's, because there are so many different directions they could go with it, as far as like, is it going to be a system that's about like connecting? Because when they opened it, it looked like it had a bunch of predetermined paths. Like it was like a bunch of, like spider webs going out everywhere. So I wonder if it's going to be like, this is like a very, because like we know they have this really complex economy. So one of the things that I think a lot of people criticize, I know I criticize it about some of the races, is that a lot of them have like a unique resource, but it's very self-contained, which for some races makes sense. Like for Tehenwin, is he going to do anything with his captives other than sacrifice them to Sotek? No, he's just going to cut people's hearts out and Kali Ma and all that stuff. But for the Dark Elves, the slaves are supposed to be a much more like they're kind of a little oversimplified, right? Like there's not really any type of slave trading with the other Dark Elf factions, which I think a lot of Dark Elf players would very much like. And we do know that the Dark Elf slaves have been experimented very heavily with. We could see that it was very obviously in preparation for the Chaos Dwarfs. Which I do want to address something that I have seen come up a lot in the community that I just want to kind of answer now, because I can confirm this for a lot of people. I literally got a message from someone that asked me, do you think they're calling the Chaos Dwarf slaves laborers to be PC? And it's like, no. It's a different mechanic from Dark Elf slaves. So to let people not be confused, they call Dark Elf slaves slaves, and they called Chaos Dwarf slaves laborers because they do different things. They're still unpaid laborers. They're still forced laborers. It's just it's just they're cutting down on they don't want to just they don't want to give you a sentence of like unpaid forced laborers. Like that's just a mouthful. Just laborers is fine, but that's
never retiring, unpaid.
Yeah, but
some of the memes that we've seen on that topic have been pretty funny. But yeah, and it was obvious it wasn't about being PC because they left the Dark Elves in, and that's not they're not that incoherent.
But it's like something that it definitely will not be in at the Chaos Dwarf launch, but something I would love to see hypothetically one day would be a mechanic where you could exchange like slaves and laborers between the Dark Elf Chaos Dwarfs to really allow players to explore that dynamic. I think one of the main criticisms of Immortal Empires for a lot of people tends to be what's known as the Order Tide, which is that all of the Order factions tend to get along very nicely. So they have a tendency to bandy up into a big swarm of all the good guys, and a lot of the bad guy races can really suffer because of that. I think the most exciting thing for me for the Chaos Dwarfs, for those who are not going to be playing them, is the Chaos Dwarfs are such a critical linchpin in the alliance of baddies, because they are like the ultimate race when it comes to, no, we work with all the evil races, because at the end of the day, as long as we get what we want, like, we don't care. And they supply the forces of chaos with all those crazy weapons and armaments and stuff. They're willing to work with the greenskins in order to get more greenskin slaves by using the tribes against one another. I would have zero doubt from a lore perspective that even though I'm sure they fight as often as they work together, I would believe 1,000,000,000 times that there have been Dark Elf Black Arcs positioned at the mouth of ruin to trade with the Chaos Dwarfs. because they're like, hey, you know, we got some of these, you got some of these. You know, Chaos Dwarfs are very particular a lot of times about their slave quality. It's like, yeah, we've got hordes of greenskins, but we could really use, like, maybe we want the blood of these very specific slaves for a ritual, or we need slaves that are less stupid. You know, we could use some better human quality. You know, someone that we could actually trust to be near a forge and not stick their hand in it, because you know, orcs and goblins are going to be orcs and goblins. But do y'all have any kind of hopes about, like, the Chaos Dwarfs as far as how they'll function with the other factions, the other races within the game? Because, like, we're really, you know, the Chaos Dwarfs, something that came up a lot when I was doing the Q&A that, you know, required kind of a lot of inferring as opposed to being able to directly read, is how they interact with everyone. You know, this is going to really be the first time we get to see the Chaos Dwarfs play with all the different races.
Yeah, I think shits will know this, but they use the slaves as sacrifice in different magic means. Like, one kind of slave is better than the other for this kind of sorcery, and like, a Chaos Dwarf have never been to Lustria, like, that I know of. But shits may know more. But this may be the first time we get to go to Lustria.
Yeah. I mean, and Jasko, I don't want to tread on you before going on another rant. Anything?
No,
you
you
thought
didn't.
about that?
No, it's fine. Well, no, I mean, just to the last point, Chaos Dwarfs are really, they view every other living being as beneath them. I mean, for sure. They have contempt for everything and everybody. And they would always prefer, just taking from you what they want than to bargain with you or to barter with you. But that being said, I still expect them to be, as you said, Sotek, this intermediary, because they have interest in everything. They need labor. So I could very well see them at exactly this point with, like, trading slaves, trading their weaponry, their machinery for stuff they need. Because on the flip side, Chaos Dwarfs in the law, there are very, very few. There's a very, very small group of individuals, even way less than the ancestor dwarfs, and they are already considered to be rare, and they lost millions of dwarfs in the
right. Well,
war,
I mean, we've seen there's only 4 of them. Like, there's only 4 Chaos Dwarf factions on the entire Immortal Empire's map. You got a whole planet, you got 4 of them.
Yeah, exactly. So they have to interact with the other races, because, I mean, they haven't been to Lustria. Probably they can't. There's just not enough Chaos Dwarfs to sail to Lustria. So
right.
they need the Dark Elves to do that. Bring some awesome Taurus warriors back as fantastic workers in the forge.
All right, just go. What you got?
But from a mindset, they hate them.
Listen, they hate everything. We got poetry to prove it. Yeah, look, I think the key thing that people often miss about the dwarfs is that the Chaos Dwarfs, is that they are extremely insular. They have no interest in expansionism, and it would take something narrative like the drill of Hashut or the fall of whatever to prompt them to leave the Darklands at all, because the Darklands has everything they need for their very awful life that they live because of Hashut and the deal that they made with him, right? They have all the coal, all the plentiful green skins that they can use to get stuff done, and then their society is focused inward. But in a similar way to the Skaven, a lot of people also don't realise, nobody knows the Chaos Dwarfs exist, because the Order Dwarfs in the World's Edge Mountains keep it ruthlessly secret, and people generally die if they go through or near the Darklands, right? Because the Chaos Dwarfs themselves do not leave a very, very small 5-mile radius, most of the time, outside of their fortresses, except in Manowar, where we have a giant navy and we travel all around the world, but we forget about Manowar because it's not important. And in that context, right, what is so important to the gameplay, and I think you touched on it earlier, Sotek, right, is fundamentally, how are we going to interact with Warriors of Chaos factions? And how much will that be a mechanic that you can participate in? Because we already know we supply the Hell Cannons, because we crew the Hell Cannons as well, right? And from that perspective, that arms dealing thing is really important. But just one last thing that viewers might not be aware of if they haven't read Tamakan, buy Tamakan and read Tamakan. Tamakan contains a very clear description of the way in which the Chaos Dwarfs have to be beaten in battle by the Nurgle Horde before they will even get out of bed to help the other Warriors of Chaos faction. Do you know what I mean? And there is a long, drawn-out battle between Drazoath and Tamakan before Drazoath signs on with Tamakan's Horde and joins him in his adventures. That it demonstrates to you that we are not arms dealing out of like an interest in Chaos Undivided. Do you know what I mean? This is something that
purely
is
self-serving,
political and difficult. Yeah, and that's really important to balance out, because without that, you're missing that key alliance of villains aspect. But like with that, obviously have to have some complexity and some violence. I probably would be more comfortable if you didn't have Warriors, Chaos Dwarf stacks showing up in the Warriors of Chaos Endgame Crisis, for instance. Skaven and Beastmen showing up in that crisis makes perfect sense. Chaos Dwarfs showing up, I start to think that's not worth doing. Not because it wouldn't be cool, not because it wouldn't add variety, but because it wouldn't be lawful. And it wouldn't kind of make sense, because there aren't big spare armies of Chaos Dwarfs just hanging around, ready to do invasions whenever you want them.
Yeah, and I will say I'm very glad that CA, like, I do hope we get significantly more of them, but they have been fairly restrained when it comes to, for those who haven't played the game, or at least not recently, in Warhammer 3 we have what are called in-game crises. And the in-game crisis is basically that when you play through the campaign, once you have achieved your long-term... Well, you can have it trigger much earlier if you'd want. You can have it triggered on turn 5 if you want to just have a horrible time. But you can... a crisis is basically that you have a list of races, and one of the races basically goes Super Saiyan. An event happens essentially in their storyline where they are just like, we're going all out and we're going to destroy everything. And currently we have them for the Wood Elves, the Tomb Kings, though the Tomb King one's a little funky because it's technically Nagash, but he uses Tomb King armies, and Nagash himself is obviously not present yet. But it's like not the Tomb King characters, it's just the Tomb King faction. But you got the Tomb Kings, the Wood Elves, the Dwarfs, the Skaven, and there's one more, and I'm forgetting who it is. But it doesn't matter. But in any event, I do hope one day we will get like the Warriors of Chaos to have one, and then Khorne will probably have one, and Tzeentch. But I do look for vampires. Thank you. Vampire counts is the last one. I am very much looking forward to. I really hope the Chaos Dwarfs get one, because that would be insane. Where it's like they're finally coming out of the forges, and like you just see you just look in the Darklands and see like 820 stacks of Chaos Dwarfs coming for you. Like, how they figured out cloning, but I do agree that I'm very, very curious to see how they're different. Oh yeah, I forgot about the greenskin one as well. I am very curious to see how they're gonna play with the other factions, because they do really have a very unique relationship. Like, they've been doing a good job, but like the forces of chaos, like they kind of work together. But it's like the Beastmen and the Warriors of Chaos, like the Beastmen are such a weird faction, especially when played by the AI, that it's hard to play with them as an ally. But I think the Warriors of Chaos will finally like be like, oh, thank God we have a bro with the Chaos Dwarves. Yeah. And the Dark Elves tend to work more with like the Vampire Coast, as opposed to anybody else.
Makes sense.
But yeah, it will be interesting to see. So if y'all don't have any particular topics you'd like to hit, I would like to kind of look at opening the floor up for the chat. I do have a chat open here for the live stream, for if anybody has any questions for y'all, or about how, like, whether chat has any questions about how y'all are feeling about a particular thing, or if you have any predictions or ideas for a different thing. I'll kind of be looking vaguely over there if anything comes up while we're continuing to talk. But I will ask you guys this. Playing a Chaos Dwarf campaign, is there any particular race you're looking forward to fighting against with the Chaos Dwarfs? Or is there any particular area you're looking forward to trying to conquer with the Chaos Dwarfs?
Grimgor, The answer's Grimgore.
Yeah, I have seen so many posts of people who either want to play as Grimgore or people who want to play the Chaos Horse and finally curb stomp Grimgore after what he did during the end times.
Grimgore.
Yes,
Grimgore, and I would have a lot of respect for playing Grimgore and just beeline straight to the Darklands. Like throw your campaign plan out and just go straight there. And
we all knew the second they released Immortal Empires and they were like, "Hey, we moved Grimgore's start position," and we saw where he was. It was like, it's happening. Here it comes.
But for me, the second one would be the Order Dwarf. Actually, I mean, I always loved the Civil War kind of mirror matches, and this for me also would be like kind of. Very fluffy to go back to the World's Edge Mountains and be like, okay, so let's settle this one once for all.
So the question is, are you going to occupy all the dwarf holds, or are you going to raise them to the ground? I'm curious.
As I said, there are not enough ghost dwarfs to. I mean, there are not enough order dwarfs to man them all. So you're gonna burn them.
Burn it all.
Yeah.
I think the element of which. Like the abandonment by the ordered dwarf gods, I think there's a lot of desecration, a lot of revenge, a lot of hurt. These are the things that I like to explore in my writing in particular, most of it unpublished as now. But later on in the story, it's very, very important psychologically that the Chaos Dwarfs were faithful, Valaya worshipping, like Grimgi worshipping dwarfs. When the time of troubles happened, when the time of chaos happened, they had nothing. Nobody came for them. They were stuck there. And Hashut is what happens when you get abandoned in the middle of the downfall of world, right? Hashut is a bargain that you strike when all your other gods have abandoned you, and that's why it's such a terrible deal. But it was Hashut or Oblivion, and they chose Hashut, but that was because the Order Dwarf gods were nowhere to be seen, and that goes all the way back to 4th edition.
So we do have a couple of little questions that have slipped in here. So one is this is actually a great question. Which of the faction colors is your favorite so far? So we've seen, it looks like Zatan's kind of got that like crazy blue and yellow, like he's got like blue with like the flame patterns with like bright yellow and red. We've got Astrogoth seems more like kind of like a black and gold with maybe some greens in there. And then looks like Draswath is going to be kind of like your classic like dark reds. Do y'all have kind of a favorite of the three so far?
The red for me.
So for you, it's the
classic.
The oh my god, what the heck is his faction name? The Legion of Asgore colors.
Yeah, classic Asgore. And I mean, I love this the molten helmets of, I guess, the Ironsworn.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to be like, how do we make Ironsworn different from Infernal Guards? And it's like, what if they never stop burning?
That for my, I will take that for my tabletop dwarf.
I don't envy trying to paint that on there, but yeah, it'll look great.
I think some texture paint, probably some crackle paint.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Some talent.
I get scared of lava painting. I have a lava theme for my lizardmen. I pay other people to paint them. I only paint my ghosts. What about our Swedish friend? What's your favorite color scheme?
Even though I'm disappointed in Satan not being Satan the Black, but I love I love their take also. Like, it's colorful, it's awesome.
Okay, great. And Jitsuko?
I do think it's good to see blue. I think it's not that I prefer the Zaytan color scheme exactly. It's that I'm glad they decided to mix it up a little bit.
Right.
I mean, I think I will probably stick with Astrogoth, but I do think that like mostly fans of the '94 Army book, and that's why Lakey's got his backdrop the way he has, and that's usually the aesthetic that we're all collectively shooting for. I have to say,
it's a beautiful backdrop. So another question we have, how do y'all feel? So one of the units that has kind of taken over the cultural zeitgeist for people that I would say are not familiar with the Chaos Dwarfs. So a lot of people that were going onto YouTube videos and wanting to learn about like all the potential units. One of the units that kind of seemed to grab a lot of people, though it only exists in the Wolfric novel. Only place it ever gets mentioned are the so-called Chaos Dwarf Harridans. Do y'all have any feelings about, like, do you want to see the Harridans, or are you kind of like, that was a weird little Black Library thing and no thank you? Do y'all have any thoughts about that? For those in chat that have no idea what those are, the Harridans are essentially like, so the Chaos Dwarf Society tends to be very patriarchal heavy, but the Harridans were Chaos Dwarf women or dames who were past childbearing age. So since they couldn't bear kids anymore, they might as well be warriors. And instead of just being like regular warriors, they turned into these like terrifying, badass, almost like warrior monks. That were the bodyguards of sorcerer prophets, and apparently they wield big two-handed weapons, and they don't wear a ton of armor, so they're almost kind of like slayers, but instead of seeking to die like against a big monster, they seek to die by protecting the sorcerer prophet, though they would much prefer to just like cleave your head in.
It's our resident keeper of the tomes. What is?
For me, personally, I thought the Harridans were really cool. I really like the question of fertility and dying races. And I think if a race is really dying, then fertility becomes actually extremely important part of their culture. And dwarfs, although Chaos Dwarfs are somewhat immune to it because we've got demon stuff, dwarfs, elves, you know, the status of gender relations in those societies, putting aside anyone's fears about political correctness, it's something that if you tackle it in a mature way, it makes sense. I like the Harridans on that basis because it was a way of taking dwarven females, which if you don't know Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, they have a whole set of books about Order dwarven females and the way that fertility in dwarven society works. And even in Order dwarven society, not very many of those beardy male dwarfs you're seeing are actually getting to reproduce. Harridans, and the idea of Harridans as this kind of post-harem to a sorcerer prophet, but no less like edgy and badass for it. Do you know what I mean? It felt cool and well realized. Putting it into the game probably poses as many questions for CA as it answers. And the roster doesn't demand it. There's nothing missing that they fill in. So from that perspective, for me, I think it would be pretty cool, yeah. I think that CA would do it well, and it would be one of the most interesting things they could do to innovate a bit without losing touch with the lore. And I think that's a good balance.
I just need me more lady dwarfs. Like,
Maybe...
go ahead.
Maybe the Immortals may be Harridans in Mask.
Very possible.
The great reveal.
We've had some serious conversations about that mask.
Hey,
and if anyone's interested.
Actually, okay. So real quick, let me get the last. Harridan? Any thoughts, Harridans? Okay, so
you said it.
Since you brought it up, I think that's actually a great thing to swerve into real quick. What do y'all think of the Immortals? Because they're very unique compared to everything else we see in the unit card art. Like, those death masks are pretty serious.
Yeah, it's a cool unit for sure. But if they're gonna be immortal, I'd like a big ass shield to go with it.
They're immortal. Why? You don't need shields if you're immortal.
That's true, though.
You can't die.
They don't need armor at all. Then
it's just there for style points.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, the unit card looks excellent. I mean, and I'm I'm sure they are the regiment of renown. I mean,
that does seem like
it would be for if the Chaos Dwarf faction's regiment of renowned hobgoblins, that would be a huge kick in the dwarf butt. So I demand that the Immortals will be the awesome regiment of renown with an awesome, unique look with the masks, really setting them apart from the rest.
Yeah, and something I this is a theory I kind of posited in one of my videos, and I'm curious how y'all feel about it. And that it almost kind of feels like the design for the Immortals was kind of reverse engineered from Black Orcs, in the sense that we know a lot of, one of the most famous things is that Da Immortals with a Z, Grimgor Ironhide's, personal bodyguard, and buddies that he goes out on the town with are, of course, Grimgor based them off the actual Immortals, because apparently they were the one thing that was so impressive or so terrifying to Grimgor that he, they just stuck in his brain forever. And you can almost look at the Black Orcs we have now, especially their helmets and the way like their faces are, and you could see how the Immortals are similar to that, almost as if the Black Orcs based the design of their own armor after they saw the Immortals themselves and were like, oh, those lads are dead hard. We want to look like them. I'm curious if y'all agree with that, or if you think, feel free to do with that what you will.
It's a good catch.
All
for
I
me.
would say so is that. Go ahead, Jasko. Sorry.
No. That was all I wanted to say. Please, just go.
I think we are pretty sure we know in the community what exact tabletop miniature that immortal unit card is based on.
Oh, do we have a picture?
And if anyone, we probably shouldn't do that. Sotek.
Oh, okay.
It is a non-Games Workshop miniature.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
It is a proxy from a third party. Blah 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 blah. Come and join our Discord if you want to have a chat about it. But it's no longer available for sale either. So, and look, it looks awesome, and I think we have a big problem with the Chaos Dwarfs from a roster perspective, which is how many flavors of heavy infantry that move slowly does one faction need, right? And if you read our fan books that we've been playing with for all these years, like the Warhammer Armies Project one, shout out to Matthias Ellison, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. We have like, in a full fan codex, we have like 8 or 9 different slow-moving, heavily armored, heavy infantry options. And while the Order Dwarfs make that work quite well, like, it gets a bit excessive sometimes. Writing the Immortals in as their own unit type compared to Regiment of Renown, it would have been redundant because we've got Infernal Guard and then Iron Sworn on top of that, and you end up in that kind of Marvel versus Capcom, like who would win in a fight between all of the different Chaos Dwarfs in heavy armor. Right. And having them as a Regiment of Renown is just like sweet spot. You still get it, you still get the aesthetics, you still get all of it, but don't have to have a bloated roster. That's what I'm hoping for. And yeah, I think if that's what they've done, they've made the right choice.
Did anyone ever think we'd be having a conversation where the words bloated roster and Chaos Dwarfs are in the same sentence?
Wow, that just goes to show. We have that debate all the time. Okay, there's a huge argument about the notion of Chaos Dwarf Berserkers. By huge argument, I mean I disagree. That's it. That's the entire argument.
They're called Heritants. Those are your Berserkers.
That we should have, right, that we should have when people convert Fire Slayer models, right, they want to have Chaos Dwarf Slayers, but they don't want them to be Infernal Guard, and so they want to have like topless Chaos Dwarfs with plaited hair and 2 axes. And like, to me, that is like one step too far, right? We don't need everything all the time. Other people love those models and they make loving conversions and they make things that I could never possibly make. And like, so from that perspective, within the tabletop community, because we only have had our own material to work with for decades, bloated rosters is all we basically know how to do. Right. Because we make up our own models all the time.
Yeah, it's how many variants can I make of this one unit type?
Exactly. Guy with axe.
Yeah. So another question that came in here that I thought was interesting. So one of the things that Total War does, and they do really well, is they have these little vignettes or art pieces that when different events occur in the campaign, so like you get a rebellion at one of your settlements, or a character dies, or you form a diplomacy pact with someone, these little artwork pieces show up and they've got like this cool little movement to them as they like slowly fade to being like almost kind of black and white. Is there anything that comes to mind for you for an event what vignette are you do you think you're the most excited to see? So the vignettes we typically get is there's one for when a diplomacy pact is formed, there's one for when a rebellion occurs and you're being like warned about it, there's one for when a character dies that you have, and there's one for when like one of your settlements falls or is taken. Is there any one of those that you're like really excited to see how the artwork's going to look?
So, I mean, obviously the rebellion with like the slave revolt. I mean, it writes itself what happened. Well,
yeah.
But I was just thinking, when a character dies, maybe we will get a sorcerer gets petrified.
Could be. We do see the petrified sorcerers on the during the Draswath scene in the trailer. You can see that line.
Oh, you're right.
I guess
You're right.
I guess former lords of the Black Fortress.
You're right. Exactly. There you go. I mean, that could be could be cool, and that would be a way for them to include this very iconic thing about petrification into the game without having it happening in your third turn and on the actual battle. Would be nice.
Small minds think alike. I thought same as you. I'd like a row of stone statues with petrified sorcerers.
they're just wheeling. They got a wheel cart. And they're just bringing up the newest one.
Bring it in, guys, and done. Yeah, exactly. The guy with the little cloth, like polishing it, and.
I think it's important though. Like I think that would be a hall of honor within a Chaos Dwarf fortress. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I think every sorcerer prophet looks down that infinite line of petrified sorcerers and thinks it's not going to be me. I'm going to be the one.
Yeah, look at all these chumps.
Genuinely. I think that's what makes them so compelling as characters, is that they psychopathically all believe, and they have to believe, that they're going to be the one who's going to crack the code. Because otherwise, how could they get out of bed every day?
You know, it's almost a shame to me that the Chaos Dwarfs are a little too... You know, if orcs and goblins had characters that turned into statues, they would use those as artillery pieces. The Chaos Dwarfs care a little too much for dramatic reveals, but yeah.
Well, there's lots of people who use as unit filler. You'll be aware of this, Sotek, right? So if you're not a tabletop gamer, sometimes to bulk out your regiments to have like a high head count, you'll make something on a 40mm base that will take up the space that 4 people would be, but it'll be a single miniature. There's lots of people who do a big petrified sorcerer because it's so easy to paint dry brushed stone, right? And they have a couple of Lakey, have you got one?
Yep.
It's a classic. It's just a classic. Take any sorcerer miniature that you want, paint him up in stone, and then give him like gems for eyes or whatever, and it's the perfect unit filler. People love it.
Yeah, he's been carried by bulls.
There you go.
So a couple rapid fire questions for y'all. These should be pretty simple, like just kind of quick answers. So of the roster we've seen so far, what's your favorite unit?
Iron Demon.
Iron Demon?
Yeah.
Choo-choo. Thomas the Tank Engine coming in. I have to say, I cannot believe that we have finally gotten to the point where the demonic Thomas the Tank Engine that has been a meme for so many years, it's like, no, it's just a literal, it's not a meme, it's a literal unit. It's even got terrifying,
like, gotta have some fun there, yeah.
It's got like, it's even got like terrifying shotgun blasters on the front.
The blunderbuss for sure.
Yeah, the blunderbuss looks really good. The shots we've seen of it in the Astrogoth trailer, love the projectile trails. Looks like it does a lot of damage too. I don't know if y'all saw the clip where they shoot to that lord that's like running away from the battle, and his health just dropped. It was like, oh, those look like they've got good armor piercing values.
I'm surprised. I wonder how the range will be like. Will they have the short range as in on tabletop or not?
I bet they will, because it looks like they're kind of using the same profiles as the Iron Hail Gunners from Grand Cathay, which are a devastating unit if they can get a volley into you. Like, they're not super long range, and they tend, they can be very easily blocked, so you kind of have to make sure they have like that line of sight without something in the way. But man, if they open up into you, it hurts. So I imagine it'll be very similar.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Me, it's got to be the Lamassu, even though I don't like the redesigned face. It doesn't matter. They got the smoke right, and the smoke spilling out of the Lamassu's mouth. That's all I need.
Yeah, damn thing literally is roaring magic at people to hurt them, which is kind of crazy. I'm really excited to see its passive abilities. They've been doing some really interesting things in the more recent updates. We saw with like Nurgle, they added the immune to contact effects system. So like they're starting to, so in Total War, we have a system of contact effects being like poison, fire, magic, stuff like that. But they've started to work on like reverse effects to that. So I really am curious if they're going to give the Lamasu the ability to negate magic damage. If they did, that would be huge, because that would make physical resistance like so much stronger, because there would be no way to get around it. Second question for y'all, and probably a difficult one, or maybe not, could be easy. Who are you going to play first? Who's going to be your first campaign? Astrogoth, Drazhoath, or Zatan? Granted, we haven't seen exactly what Drazhoath and Zatan are bringing to the table yet. We don't even know where Zatan's going to start. Like, I feel pretty confident Drazhoath is going to start, in the southern Darklands at the Black Fortress. That's far enough away from Astrogoth where it will feel pretty different. But Zatan could literally be anywhere. Like, who knows where he's going to be?
I'm gonna start as Satan for sure, but my campaigns are short. I lose in turn 10, so
you can always turn the difficulty down.
what?
Oh no, that's with it. That's with it down.
He's sitting there playing on Legendary, being like, "I will make this fucking work."
He's too good at tabletop.
Turn 5 every end game. Thank you.
We need to make a turn-based mode for the tabletop classics.
I would start
for me, it's got to be. Sorry, Jessica.
No, that's it. Answer Drazhoath. Yeah, for me.
Drazhoath, okay.
But Astrogoth, because I can't imagine being satisfied with the other two confederating Astrogoth. Astrogoth can confederate the other two from the Conclave. I can live with that. But then when I play the other two, I'm just going to have to kill him.
That's fair.
You can't play as the Legion of Asgore and Drazhoath without killing Astrogoth. That's my personal view.
The joys.
Right.
Yeah, hey, I feel you. The joys of when you put a lore person into a sandbox game. It's like, I'm aware I can do these things, but they're wrong.
I must. Yeah.
So one other question we have coming in here real quick is, after you conquer the Darklands, where will you take your armies next? So we know we had a couple answers for the Dwarfs, but he kind of specifies, do you want to go west to focus on the Dwarfs and the Empire? Do you want to go east to focus on the Ogres and Grand Cathay? Do you want to go south to take the fight to the Lizardmen and the Tomb Kings? Or north to face off against the Warriors of Chaos?
I want to see Ulthuan burn. Is that a choice?
Oh, yeah. I mean, hey, go south to the ocean. Quick sail.
Right.
I mean, it's a long sail, but you get the point.
I mean, it would make sense to start with the ogres, to use them as basically like fluffy. It would be the law-wise choice to start with the ogres. But as I said, I guess I would start with the Dwarfs. I have some scores to settle.
Mm.
My novella is set on a way station out to the Mountains of Morn. So I'd have to do the Mountains of Morn. And actually, I agree, Jessica, it's for the very same reason. The reason I set it there is because they want to get ogre slaves, because ogre slaves are an inherently valuable economic commodity, right? You see them on the Dreadquake mortar. And so it would have to be the Mountains of Morn for me.
Awesome. And I think we've pretty much covered just about everything. There's a lot of exciting footage to look forward to. We got a new week coming up, so there's almost certainly going to be another blog this week, probably some more campaign footage, some more battle footage. I imagine they'll be probably showing off Drazhoath or Zatan this week, if I had to guess, which should be very, very exciting, either this week or next week. I don't remember if they're doing, well, no, because we have less than a month to go until this is out. So they actually do not have a ton of time to waste. Oh, no, there is one last big thing to ask y'all about. How do y'all feel about the narrative they've introduced? So the Chaos Dwarfs are building the almighty drill of Hashut, a drill that could pierce the heavens for anime fans out there. So they're creating a literal machine that can drill through dimensions. How are y'all excited? Are you like, whoa? Like, what are your thoughts on the proposed narrative?
I immediately started to think about the realm, like the Age of Sigmar narrative,
Yes.
where they drill through the different realms.
They're going to drill to AOS.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hey,
or something like it.
I'm still holding my theory. They're gonna drill through. They show up in 40K at the ends of Arcs and Omen, just start spanking Space Marines left and right.
Dwarfs definitely a Chaos Dwarf. I mean,
everyone expects it to be AOS, but it's actually Chaos Dwarfs in 40K with the steel chair.
Yeah, but the drilling to Hashut makes no sense to me. Like, it's not Slanesh that is trapped or anything. Like, what's the point of that?
Hey man, if Hashut's got his, obviously I don't think we know for sure, though I bet he does. Hashut probably has his own little domain in the realm of chaos. The Skaven, Warhammer 2, we're busy trying to get the Great Horned Rat to come into the Warhammer world to physically manifest so he could dominate. I don't know what Hashut looks like exactly, but I bet he'd be pretty terrifying if he actually came out in person.
I mean, so the narrative, that was, to be honest, I mean, that was the only thing I was like, okay. I mean, at this point, I don't care. Give it to me. I will.
Listen,
it does ring a little bit Skaven-y for me. The whole giant drill. I mean, for my taste, they could have gone with this classic tale of the what was it called? It's the giant rocket which they built and fired in the desolation and created this.
A part of me,
a
part of me wonders. I wonder because they haven't confirmed this yet, but a part of me wonders if maybe the drill is not we're trying to open a gateway and it's more like drilling for oil. Like we're trying to drill into a different realm where we can harvest, something for new. Like, because
makes sense.
Why? We know Chaos Dwarfs love their demon forging. But hey, imagine how much more you could expedite the process if you could just rip open, the dimension to the realm of chaos itself. It's literally a realm of infinite energy, right? That's what the old ones used it for. They used it to make crazy advances. So if the Chaos Dwarfs did that, that would probably be horrifying.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, so I take it. I was like, yeah, but give it to me.
They're drilling down to find Balrogs, dude. Those Balrogs would be in for a bad time. They're expecting like the classic Lord of the Rings setup, and they're like, nah, we're fire.
Get inside this axe.
Yeah, a fire
Get
demon.
inside this steam engine.
Yeah, really.
It's like the Rick and Morty thing with what is my purpose to pass butter.
Oh my god.
Right? The Balrog's like, I am here to rule your engine carburetor.
Balrog comes out and it's like, I'm a fallen angel that's a fire demon for hell. The Chaos Dwarfs are like, oh, this will be easy. This will be way easier than we thought it would be.
Inside this battery.
Right in here.
Get inside this battery. This is what you are now. You're a battery. Jaska said it. Jaska said everything that I think about it. I think it's fine. I think it's a perfectly good MacGuffin-style reason for Astrogoth to go around and do some stuff. That we need to... But I also like to imagine that Hashut brings out another one of these dumb goals every, 150 years with every Supreme Sorcerer property. He's like, okay, now you're going to dig all the way to the Realm of Chaos. Now you're going to sacrifice one of every race in the world. Now you're going to build me a giant bronze effigy of myself. You know what I mean? Every sorcerer prophet. And it's like Charlie Brown kicking the football. You know what I mean? Hashut puts it in front of you. You run at it. You fail. You turn to stone. Bring in the next guy. Because that's what Hashut is. He's the god of domination and slavery and ruin. And working for him is a terrible fucking job.
I love the mental image that Hashut is just one of those god-awful upper management types, and the Chaos Dwarfs are like IT. So they're like, the Chaos Dwarfs are like, all right, we made this design specific to your specifications. And Hashut's like, yeah, I see that, but how about we change this? And they're like, God, no. It's just endless.
Steve Carell
I
was
think
nice,
it's- I think it's-
and Ricky, but the office in Zarnagrund would be a very funny, entertaining
That's the
show.
conclave. That is the conclave. Listen, you got your
Exactly, there you go.
hobgoblins. You got all of it.
I am very much looking forward to the Chaos Dwarf events. Like obviously they revealed the one that I've been getting endless comments about, the See It, Slay It, Sort It, as a play on the goofy British railway system. They really like doing, like, some of the events tend to be a little more serious, but a lot of them are very silly or have like ridiculous text or ridiculous titles. I'm very much looking forward to what they're going to do with the Chaos Dwarfs for like the bizarre mishaps that occur in your empire that you have to deal with.
I think things going wrong is one of the things that isn't hugely talked about in the books. That I think, like so much of cool Chaos Dwarf ideas, you borrow it a little bit from the Dark Mechanicum. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You reach into 40k and you think, what's my influence here? Dark Mechanicum. Chaos Dwarfs, I just love like cascade failures happening at every fortress. Every time someone tries something too ambitious, like that's my dream, is to have this empire where it's like, is this working? I have no idea.
Yeah, if when you think about the Chaos Dwarfs, you think that they are very competent and very dangerous. But there are texts in the different books that the two that we have that, like, when they build the machines, like the Death Shriekers, like they miss all the time, like, and they don't work properly, and they blame the demon inside the machine. Like they never built a bad machine. It's the demon's fault. And like they have a big war against the Skaven where they both like miss, and like when they fire a big nuke, they accidentally fired it into their own slave labor camp. But that's fine; it's just slaves. But like they aren't very good at building machines, it seems.
Yeah, well, it's like only the best ones make it to, like, typically will make it to like the important battlefields, right? They're like, we're gonna send out the. But I also love the idea.
It's called progress, Lakey. I mean.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite lore tidbits is how the Hell Cannons, being like a new experimental weapon, aren't that reliable yet, and they have a bad tendency to kill people. So they're like, yeah, sure, Warriors of Chaos, we'll support you with machines. And they're like, send the experimental garbage. Send the thing we don't really trust.
It's the export model.
Yeah,
it's the export model. It's fine.
It's like wow, this is.
It's got some issues.
Yeah, the Total War ones are far more reliable. In tabletop, I don't know how. Like, as a Lizardman player, I legit won games when a Warrior Chaos player's Hell Cannon would go bad. It'd fail its leadership check, and it would run forward and start eating Warriors of Chaos because it would fail its leadership, and just run forward and start munching on people. But in any event, I think that is kind of our time. We've been going a little over 2 hours now. I'm sure everyone's got other things to do, though. This has been an absolute blast. I do want to thank all three of you for coming on. This was awesome. I had a wonderful time. And if y'all have any kind of closing thoughts, and if you have also, please, if you have any kind of content you're up to, where people can find you, whether you're doing your own kind of podcast or you're posting on any particular forums or Discord community, feel free to plug all of that here, and I'll make sure we get all that information included on the video version of this. Yeah, you got any closing thoughts? Please let the people know.
This was fantastic, first of all. Thanks for having us. I mean, this is literally the most exciting thing happening for Chaos. I mean, that's meaning the trailer. I mean, this is awesome too, but the Total War DLC is literally the most exciting thing happening to Chaos Dwarfs in a decade or something like that. So excellent. We are really hyped, and the community is. We are always. I mean, we are going strong, and we will happily accommodate anybody who always had an inkling for the Chaos Dwarfs but never followed up, or anybody who is like, who are these guys? I love them. Come on over, find us at chaosdwarfs.com, chaos-dwarfs.com, and then we have a Discord, we have a forum, there's lots of places to find us. We have an Instagram, Twitter, I think. There is the podcast.
Dude, we have everything now.
We are everywhere.
Good, as it should be. The forges of Hashut are lit. They are everywhere.
Exactly. They have been running an overdrive in preparation for this for a long time.
That's great.
And like a big personal thank you to you, Sotek. Like, you helped us grow the community more than a year ago when we made our first video together, and you're here for us again now at the end of that journey. And it's just really exciting because you don't get to see a faction come back into vogue like this more than a couple of times. But I just wanted to say thank you very much to you personally for the effort that you've put into making Chaos Dwarfs Online so successful.
Well, and thank y'all for keeping the fire lit. You know, it's not, unfortunately, we lost a lot of communities, you know, when the end times happened. A lot of those really like famous forums, there used to be like super active ones for literally every single race, and a lot of them aren't around anymore. So I am so, you know, in a way, it's almost kind of weird how the Chaos Dwarfs were like, they were they were functionally squatted in a lot of ways. So the fact that y'all have held on all this time, really is kind of an inspiration for any community out there, I think. And it's so exciting. You know, it was really cool to get to see the Leagues of Votann return for 40K, but you know, it's so much more exciting getting to see the Chaos Dwarfs finally reemerge from the depths. And man, they look good. They look good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
They do.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Yep, and thanks again to everyone that watched. I will make sure to have this up in its entirety on YouTube, and we'll have all the various links and everything down in the description and the pinned comment, so you can join the community if you want to, and board the hype train that has horrifying blades and shotgun attachments. And we've already seen confirmed that you can take your trains with Dreadquake mortars attached at least, so the trains have attachments, which is awesome. And it's going to be really exciting to see how everything progresses. Other than that, I'm going to very quickly shill and say that this podcast was brought to you by me. We do have a merch store. I'm wearing my Dwarf Brewery shirt. This says established or 7,045 years of excellency for the Kozilid Empire. I really want to make a shirt that is Chaos Dwarf themed, and it says something about like, I want it to be like, it has like a Chaos Dwarf hat, and it says, you know what they say about big hats or something like that. I don't know if I could get away with that, but in any event, that's going to be it for us here. So thank you all for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
And for those watching the stream, I'm going to end it abruptly. We're not going to the usual outro. Actually, no, I will go to an outro. I'm going to tell my co-guys here that I will catch them in a minute. So I'm going to mute us all and take us to the outro. Okay, bye-bye.